first of all, I think free will is, not the most helpful thing because it bogs you down. Like, why worry about it? Like we feel like we have free will. My actions right now affect, the next moment, affects the next, our action, we can't escape what we experience as free will.
Some bored philosophers keeping them busy.
Right. I mean, essentially it is. I mean, so my tradition, my spiritual tradition, I would say, is Zen. All right. And one of the things that comes through again and again in Zen enlightenment experiences is that you don't need free will. Free will is a kind of a mirage, and it's actually really blissful when you kind of break through this idea of free will and this worry about free will and this sense of having free will. In fact, like whenever you are the most like successful at whatever it is you do, whatever flow state you get into with whatever your athletic or creative or whatever, or when you're driving a car, you're not exerting conscious free will. Your unconscious is in complete control.
Right.
Back in the late 70s and early 80s, this guy named Benjamin Libet, a neuroscientist, you may have heard of him. He performed some really fascinating experiments that were really troubling for people because they showed that our nerves would initiate an action like a half second before we were consciously aware of it. Okay.
Whoa.
Right. Which you can interpret that in multiple ways. And the way that a lot of people interpreted it was that, well, free will is just a complete mirage and we don't exert, the sense that we have of being consciously in control of our lives is completely a mirage. Another way of looking at it is that we are controlling our lives, but from the future, that we are reflecting back on think about how I don't know if you do a martial art or something. I used to do martial arts, and you'd make a particular move and you'd replay it in your head, like a successful move. You'd replay it in your head. Well, what if that mental replay, what if that mental replay is actually causing, maybe you are actually pulling your meat puppet's strings from a position displaced into your future. And that's what free will and agency, what if that's what it is? It's kind of retrocausation in the body. Yes, it raises there's amazing implications of retrocausation and its biological, physical manifestations as precognition, or what Daryl Bem called presentiment, feeling the future without being consciously aware. I think that's where it really mostly manifests. We're not consciously aware of seeing the future. I mean, that occasionally happens like in visions. People have precognitive visions. Right. But most of the time it's controlling us unconsciously. And the implications, if this exists at all, then it's
astonishing.
It's astonishing, and it's I find it incredibly exciting because it's like since the Enlightenment, if you could divide time into past and future, and then there's this line of the present in the middle of it. All we've been looking at causally for the last 3 centuries in the Enlightenment is this left half, Mm-hmm. But there's this whole right half, the future, that is, I think, and a growing number of physicists even think, is influencing our actions and influencing what happens in the physical world, that we just have had a mental block to because we threw out teleology with God, 3 centuries ago.
Okay, so time loops. It's kind of hard to conceptualize. So we got here some of your infographics that explains how this works. So it says a time loop is a causally circular formation in the block universe. An effect retro influences its own causes. Okay, so on one side, so you have a line going through the center of this loop, right? And and then the line represents time going forward from the present to the future. Mm-hmm. And on the left side of it, we have information traveling backwards in time, carried by strong emotion. And on the right side of the line, we have another curved arrow that is freely willed actions that lead to future outcomes. Okay.
So if we were like thinking about the Daryl Bem experiment, that would be a good example.
Okay.
Clicking on a curtain and suddenly being rewarded or seeing an erotic picture, that's a reward.
Yes.
That's like acting like a treat if you were training a dog or a dolphin, give them a sardine. It's like,
right.
it's like a reward. It's those little rewards, somehow we don't know the mechanism, but somehow those rewards travel backward in time. Not only rewards, but also traumas of various kinds. So that's why, people often have, if they're aware of precognition, it's often in the context of having a dream about a loved one's death, for instance.
Okay, this is interesting when you look at it this way, because this is not how I was thinking about it originally. So in the present, like we could have, like you could think of this sort of like as ambition, right? Like if you're ambitious throughout your life to achieve something, or that you want to do something with your life, all of your actions are going to be directed towards achieving this goal that you think that your life that you were destined to do, like you being a writer, right? Or me doing podcasts. So essentially the idea is that if somebody has and tell me if I'm completely butchering this, but if somebody has some sort of an idea early on in life about what they want to do with their life, and then they go to college, they get a job, they start writing books, they become a super famous published author, essentially that this happened in reverse somehow. Like this already happened and it's coming back to them, which is why they're inspired to do this in the first place.
Right.
Okay.
The question is, how pervasive is this? How much of an effect is this? How much of an effect does the future have on the past? And that's an open question. I mean, it's like, obviously it's not like an incredibly strong effect, or we'd be more aware of it. It is a subtle effect, and even in quantum physics, I mean, you can say, talking about, the direction, if you know, a lot about the position of an electron, you don't know much about its velocity, but some. I mean, there's a way in which we know most of what we need to know from classical physics that moves from back to the future, back from the past to the future.
Okay? Yes.
But we don't know everything. And that's that uncertain component that is coming from the future. So there is like an asymmetry. I think anyone who studies this would say, yeah, there's an asymmetry there. And why there's that asymmetry, I mean, who knows? I mean, you're getting into, realms that we can't even address yet. Yeah. But some component of the way the world is at this moment is a result of causes propagating backward in time versus causes going forward in time from the past. And the idea, the reason why quantum computers are so important in this is that, it doesn't really matter, this idea of, the fact that randomness is really retrocausation, it doesn't matter for just inert matter. It doesn't matter for predicting. We don't need to know about retrocausation if we're going to predict, the planets and weather and things like that. Where it becomes important is when that little retrocausal factor at the micro scale of the quantum is scaled up somehow and made coherent at a larger scale. Right. And that's what a quantum computer is, because what a quantum computer is a matrix of electrons or some particle that they're all entangled. They're all entangled. That is to say, they act as a unit. They all act together. So you do something to affect one of those particles, it affects the whole thing, simultaneously. And if you can create a system like that, and if that entanglement is really a temporal entanglement, like where it's entangled with its future, or what's going to happen in the future, then you can create a system for where a system, whether it be a living system or a mechanical system, can be influenced by things in the future in a coherent way.
You're talking about like deja vu?
Well, people have argued that deja vu is a kind of symptom of precognition, that you suddenly have an experience that you feels familiar and you don't know how. Well, maybe you had a dream and you can't remember the dream, but there's that feeling of familiarity. It's complicated with deja vu because you can artificially induce deja vu. I think you can like probe a certain part of the brain and give someone the sensation that they've experienced this before. So the possibility that this is just the brain misfiring, I think you have to kind of keep that possibility. So that's why I hesitate to say that deja vu is necessarily about precognition.
Okay.
But a lot of people through the years have argued exactly what you're saying.
Mm-hmm.